all your faces here and all you young guys, kids in the back. That's absolutely phenomenal. We really like to see that. So, but we're here to learn and we're here to share. So, without any further ado, I want to introduce our first speaker. And we were talking last night around the table just a little bit, and the word mentor came up. And Joe, whether you know it or not, you were a mentor of mine. I watched you for a lot of years. Didn't really talk to you, never really introduced myself, but I watched what you were doing and I learned a lot. But so with that, I can't say enough about what you've done. And so he's going to share some things today I think are very valuable. He's a North Dakota soil health advocate and a no-tiller for over 35 years. His operation includes a diverse crop rotation, cover crops, as well as nutrient management practices. Mr. Breker was the recipient of the National Nutrient Management Award in 2015. Please help me in welcoming Joe Breker.
Okay, am I live? Yep. Okay, that sounds good. Thank you, Brian. Oh, you think that'll sit there? I better put the mic someplace else so I don't drown it. Yeah, this is awesome. This literally takes me back about 35 years ago in the early years of the no-till movement on the plains. And I was involved in a no-till organization called the Manitoba North Dakota Zero-Till Association. And we would get regional groups of meetings this size to a no-till meeting. So this like really brings me back. Because no-till dropped off in the 90s because of moisture on the plains. We went through a 25-year period of excess moisture from 1992 or 3 to really kind of present day. But the last 3 or 4 years, things have dried out. In some areas, we still have areas struggle with too much, but for the most part, we've gotten back to more of a normal rainfall scenario here in the upper plains. So my operation is located in southeastern North Dakota, almost straight north of Watertown here. I'm a little bit west, right on the state line, North Dakota, South Dakota. So I literally have one field in South Dakota, right on the state line. Otherwise, the rest of my farm, 90% of my farm is just in North Dakota. And I've no-tilled since I got out of college. I attended NDSU, took some soils and livestock and agronomy classes. And when I went home, I grew up from the age of 10, I grew up doing tillage. Started plowing for a couple of years. Then my dad and his brother were farming together, and they switched to minimum tillage, which was chisel plows and discs. And then the age of chemical incorporated herbicides came in. Treflan, Eptam. Those herbicides came in. Well, guess what? They needed to be applied according to, science. They needed to be applied to a clean tilled field and then work twice. So we had a major setback in our operation and the whole region in that area. So that was in the 70s when I was in high school. And fields blew every winter, all winter, with chemical in them. So when I came home, I had heard a little bit about no-till, and I thought, this might be something that I should look more into. So I actually went north. I went into Canada to find growers that were no-tilling. Jim McCutcheon. He's passed away now, but he was kind of known as the grandfather of no-till on the northern plains. Great man, just really thought-provoking, and he was proving that you can protect your soil and plant crops. But so it's time. Let's fast forward, and the difference between, and soil health is such a great, That's why you're here, because the term soil health, right? Used to be a no-till meeting, now it's called soil health. What's the difference? Really, what's the difference between no-till and soil health? More plants. That's really all the difference is. Most no-tillers had crop rotations because they kind of needed to anyway, although a lot went away from that, went just to corn and beans. But more plants, cover crops came in, and then all of a sudden we started realizing that we had something called soil health going on. We started looking underground. So I'm going to bring you up to the current, and we'll just talk about what I've learned in 17. And we're going to go back and forth a little bit. But, okay. What have I learned in 17? Wind still blows on the plains. Still dirty ditches everywhere you go. This is right across from my driveway. A neighbor's field blew all winter last winter. I'm pushing the button too hard. Okay. And when a front comes in and the crops are all planted, these were mostly corn and soybean fields that were blowing because the wheat was up far enough already to not be blowing. Up comes the dust front with a 60-mile-an-hour wind. Well, so on the northern plains, you're either just getting the front to come through, you've had a front go through, or you're just on a big wind in between fronts, right? We live in windy country, so we can expect that kind of stuff. But isn't that sickening? That stuff is not ending up in the road ditch. That's ended up in some ocean someplace. That's in the air, and it's gone. All right, so what can we do about it? One of the things, probably one of the neatest things that I've been doing the last half a dozen years is actually planting green. So here I'm planting soybeans into a living rye cover. And now this is actually volunteer rye. So this rye got established after rye harvest. And this is a crop of volunteer rye, and I'm planting soybeans into it. Now I'm spraying it out. It was dry when we were planting, and we have been. The last several springs we've had a new challenge again, and that is dealing with dry springs. And that rye has taken a fair amount of moisture already. So it's a little unnerving. Okay, I'm planting into conditions that I may or may not get my crop up without a rain. It's well protected. I already know I love what these covers do, but I did pull the trigger and spray this out a little bit earlier than I would have liked to have. I would have liked to see it. It's in the boot. I would have liked to see it headed before I sprayed it. So lo and behold, we had a few tenths of rain, and the beans were coming up just fine in that dead rye. And the Soybean Council, North Dakota Soybean Council, who has really bit into soil health in a big way. They pay for a lot of research in the state. They followed this rye field through the year doing some video and photography. And this is the cover of the North Dakota Soybean Council's research report magazine. It's our operation on that field. And that was a good field of soybeans. The yield monitor ended up at 59 bushel. The beautiful part is that had no pre-emergent chemicals and 2 Roundup sprayings on it. And it was absolutely clean. Now, I'm not recommending that you leave the pre's at home. What I'm saying is that when you have a good stand of rye and you put beans into it, there's a good chance you're going to have a lot less weed problems than if you don't have cover there, and especially rye cover, because there is a allelopathic effect, but soybeans don't have a problem with it. They love it. They pod higher. You can harvest faster. That's the other side benefit. So another way to get rye into a different part of your rotation is this is aerial broadcast rye into standing corn. And this was done in mid-September, kind of the traditional winter wheat rye planting time. The corn is basically physiologically mature, and it's going to shortly start to senesce and dry down and open up the rows. All you need is a rain. And this year we got one. It was best stand I've had, and I was just visiting with a young gentleman here before the meeting, and we have had 0 snow at our place, and whether that rye will make it since the crown is above ground and all that, who knows? We'll see. Rye's tough. Probably will. So here's a shot of rye coming up, aerial broadcast rye into corn stalks. I'm spraying the rye out. Again, we were dry. I pulled the trigger a little early. I would have certainly liked to have seen that go a little further. Another thing we're trying, the last few years, NDSU, again, through money that they've gotten through either grants or money they've gotten from commodity groups, they paid for the development of an interplant machine, interseeder. And this happens to be a company that my brother works for, Amity out of Fargo. Tank probably is familiar to a lot of you. So this is a Amity single disc drill on a 3-point with an air cart behind it. And we're planting cover crops down between, this was a winter wheat cereal grain field that had a really tremendous cover on it from the year before. NDSU actually did clippings and dried it, and it had like a 5,500 pound dry weight cover. And that's not counting the leftover stubble. So there was a lot of cover in here, and we no-tilled the corn into it. So there's a few pictures of what you see. There's rye and radish coming between the corn, and the corn was at 4.5 leaf when we planted the cover, and that's just when corn really starts to take off. So the corn was already starting to cover the rows, and the rye was in the 2.5 leaf stage, I suppose. Here we're probably at about 8 leaf, and the rye is just sitting there, just doing nothing. No worries about it taken away from the corn crop whatsoever. In fact, I wish it was a little bigger in there, but the corn outcompeted it. And then here's at tassel silking, and unless it gets some light, if you had a little space where a ray of sunshine hit the ground, then the rye grew and was a little bit bigger, and the radishes, but wherever there was competition, it really didn't amount to much. Now, the trick is that the corn is so competitive doing these interplants, it can literally kill the cover crop. And what we're trying to do is look at different covers that withstand shade, and so when I go to meetings like this, I am always looking for conversations, what somebody else has done. And in this test, we did camelina, which is kind of a new it's a winter camelina. It's something that NDSU is looking at pretty hard, and South Dakota and Minnesota, because I know that all 3 locations are working on camelina at the same time here. And but we've had really hard time getting camelina to survive any shade or competition. The radishes do pretty well, and the rye do pretty well. So at this point right now, I'm looking for additional covers that will handle shade. Something I've been doing for quite a while, and this came out of research. A group of farmers from the state line area, Day County, Marshall County in South Dakota, Sargent, Ransom, Richland, and Dickey County in North Dakota, We started 20 years ago, we started a research farm at Foreman, North Dakota called CCSP. Maybe some of you have heard of it. But we had a couple managers over those 20-year time, and one of the things that came out of it was looking at using, our goal was to stay as no-till as possible, but we were seeing good results, consistent results using strip till, especially in wheat stubble. So we were wondering if we could mimic strip till with cover crops. Because we also, like anybody that's strip tilled for very many years, has seen erosion down a slope, down a strip. It happens, and it's not good, it's not pretty. So we want to get away from that as much as possible, have more covers involved. So this is an Amity single disc drill with a dual air cart system, so I can, this drill has a deep bander and 2 seed discs. And the deep bander I use for other purposes, like placing fertilizer. But in this particular case, I'm placing a large seeded legume, either a pea or a faba bean, in the deep bander, and then using the seed discs to plant a smaller seeded mix of covers. Here it's just coming up. In that mix, it's hard to see. A little bit bigger shot. There's this particular row, there's peas and faba beans in the center with radish, turnip, flax in the outer rows, and then volunteer wheat coming in between. Okay, here's a side-by-side of on the right side of that screen, there's faba beans in that row. On the left side, it's field peas, or forage peas, actually. And I've had one complaint, my own personal, is with, I love peas. They've done well, they produce a lot of biomass, they're fairly cold tolerant, they establish relatively easy, seed is quite available, so that's where it stops. They have a really ornery residue, so if you don't graze them off enough, they can interfere with planting in the springtime. And they can kind of get to be a mat of residue that's a little bit hard to deal with. So I'm looking at a few other legumes, but faba bean is one of them. Now here, standing in that same position as that other picture, and on the right, that dark strip is the faba bean, and on the left, the volunteer grain and the peas blend in at the same color. Here's in a winter cereal field, so the winter cereal didn't get as big and try to head out like the spring wheat did. But you can see certainly the difference in the color of the faba bean versus the pea. And that's really what I'm after, two things: an easier to deal residue and a residue that's a little darker. And the whole purpose of strip till is to produce a dark, warmer strip to plant your corn into. And I wasn't getting that with the peas. I was getting a cool, shaded area. Again, I haven't quit using peas yet, but if I can get faba beans to continue to work out, the seed's more expensive. There's always a trade-off, it seems like, when you get down right down to it. Peas have been costing me about $8 to $10 an acre inoculated. And the faba beans raise that another $5 an acre. So that's substantial. The rest of the cover crops in there, the turnips, radish, flax, they're pretty reasonable. They add up to about $8 an acre. Here was this spring. And last fall, I had just enough faba beans to plant one round or one strip down the field in a cereal grain stubble as a cover. On the left side of your screen, you can probably guess, that was the faba bean, right? And on the right side of your screen is the peas. And we were, at planting time, we were taking thermometer readings in those zones, and the faba bean area was about 9 degrees warmer. So we had, in late April, we had 55, 58 degree soil temperatures where the faba beans were. So I don't know, it's interesting. It's something I'm going to continue to look at. This year, when I harvested that field, with 40 pounds of nitrogen, that was the total nitrogen applied to that field, with 40 pounds of nitrogen, the faba bean rows ran 30 bushels better than the pea row, where the peas were at. And I don't think I'd see that big a yield difference every year, but we had a really dry, cool spring, and we just didn't get enough mineralization early for the corn. I could have compensated that yield, I think, by more nitrogen on the pea side, but because the faba beans broke down quicker, I don't know that they produced more nitrogen. I don't really think they probably did, but they broke down quicker, and that soil was warmer, so that mineralization process started a little sooner, and I think that's where the yield came from. The stand was equal on both sides, but the corn was a leaf stage ahead all year. So, that alone could be the difference. All right, so some of the things, some of the other soil health practices I've been trying, we live 15, my farm is 15 miles away from the Veblen Dairy. And that's the Marshall Dairy. There's 20,000 milk cows just 15 miles from my place. So they have a lot, like the dairy, the feed and manure manager said, there's one thing we do really well here. We produce a lot of manure, he said. So I've been getting a manure product that comes, it's a screened solids product out of their lagoon, out of their liquid slurry, and they need a place to haul it, so they've been hauling it to me and windrowing it. I bought a composter out of Ontario, Canada, called a Sittler, and I'd been to a field demonstration and watched one work and thought, that looks like the cat's meow, and it really does work well. So there's that same windrow about 6 weeks later. That's kind of, it still amazes me. I have about a 70% reduction in bulk and about the same reduction in total weight, because as I compost it, it dries out. So I'm not only reducing the bulk, but I'm drying it out. And I end up, on my spreader, that's 2.5 semi-loads of the original product on that spreader. So last year they brought me 500 semi-loads of manure, and I hauled out 180 loads with my spreader. That was kind of nice. So now we're starting the process all over again. Just a shot of me spreading. You can see it. The thing I like, okay, so let's talk about compost just a little bit. Why did I start doing it? I had a livestock herd. I have recently sold them, but I had the years I had livestock. I started the composting process when I had livestock. Our Soil Conservation District bought a brown bear composter. It's kind of like a snow blower that windrows the stuff off to one side. Maybe some of you have seen it. It was very inefficient. It worked though, it did compost, but it was just very difficult to get much done with it. But what I wanted to do is control weed seeds, and especially if you're getting manure from somebody else's farm, the thought of ending up with, I didn't want to be the first one in North Dakota to have Palmer amaranth on my farm. So that was one of the reasons why I started composting. And the composting done properly is very effective at killing weed seeds. I have not seen anything growing out of my properly composted manure that I didn't want growing out of it. Okay, so we're here for a soil health meeting, and all these different things that we try to make our soil healthy, like leaving residue, crop rotations, planting more plants, maybe applying a manure, maybe grazing livestock on it, all those things go to improving the soil health. And one of the measure of soil health, and the easiest, is to just take a shovel out in your field and see what's going on below ground. You're not always just depending on moisture conditions and stuff. Even if you have a lot of earthworms, they're not always going to look that aggressive in that picture. But when you have the right moisture conditions at the right time of the year, you can tell a lot what's going on in your soil with soil health. I've done a little bit of adding up, and I've seen it in other farm magazines and stuff too. It takes about, 4 or 5 worms per square foot to equal a mature cow on an acre. And if you're approaching 20 worms or more, that means you got a small herd of cows on every acre of your farm underground. And that's just the biology you see. Just think of all the other biology that's working that you don't see. So it's important to feed, if you have livestock underground, it's important to feed them a nutritional balanced diet, and that's what covers give you. You know, in an annual cropping system, even in a good rotation, you're feeding a monoculture residue once every 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and then going on to the next one. And that helps. I mean, I'm not saying you won't have a lot of worms, just no-tilling. But if you want to have worms on steroids, throw some covers in there. It's just totally amazing what it does. Here's some NDSU soil students, technicians. And the young man, Luke, on the right, for one of his master's projects, he got some liquid latex, and he asked if he could pour some liquid latex on the ground, on some of my fields, and I said, yeah, I don't care. You know, just let me know where they are so I'm not disturbing your... He said, oh, it's only going to take a few days anyway. So he went out in a couple of the fields and put some liquid latex down, and does that look like that soil? So obviously the liquid latex ran down any channel, any macropore in that soil below where they poured it. Does that look like that soil would have good water infiltration? Probably. I don't know, you know, I don't know what rate, but it's certainly going to have. I think next year he's going to extend that to a lot of different more. He's going to continue this and go to show different types of tillage systems, but he just wanted to try it on something that would show him some results right away, he said. One of my crop rotations on our farm is radish for seed. So I'm one of the growers that grows jackhammer radish for seed, and it's a daikon type radish. A friend and I from North Dakota, we trademarked jackhammer. So basically, I planted daikon radish that I really, really, really like, and then we thought, well, how do we track this? How do we, variety non-specific just doesn't cut it. So we trademarked the jackhammer name on a daikon radish, and we've been doing this now for about 10 years. And I saw our ad in a farm magazine, and I thought, okay, are we doing this right? And it says, ask your seed dealer to include jackhammer brand radish in your cover crop blend. And I thought, yes, we are doing that right. So yeah, it isn't a standalone cover crop. It's part of a cover crop blend if it's done right. In my bio strip till, this would be a typical about 2 months after planting, 2.5 months after planting. That's right down the row. I just shoveled away the soil on one side. And, you know, could you do more tillage than what those plant roots are doing for you? I just don't know if you could do more tillage. You certainly couldn't do it any deeper very effectively than roots are doing, so why not use roots? I'm going to diverge a little bit from soil health to, since I've been no-tilling and doing conservation education, I kind of find myself preaching to the choir a lot. You know, this is a great crowd because there's some new ears in here, but still there's a lot of ears in here that have heard this story before. What we did on our farm is we built a lodge on our farm, and it was the primary reason for it was to add some diversification, add a job for kids coming home from college, and yeah, adding another business center to our farm. But it also gives us an opportunity to interact with public. And we're not talking preaching to the choir here. We're people that have never seen a tractor sometimes, you know. People don't understand the food system at all. And it's been really fun to interact with the public and be able to take them and show them a real farm. This is my wife, Patty, of 39 years. Here's my 3 children. I have a foster son that's not shown on this picture, but my daughter on the left manages the lodge. My son in the center lives in the Twin Cities and is a pharmacist. And he's just as big a part of the farm business dealing with the lodge as if he was living at home. It's so awesome to be able to get your kids that aren't at home involved in your business. And it's been a special treat for me. So he does our social media and all our special event planning. And today with the technology, he can do that from the Minneapolis area. He's 4 hours from home. Then my youngest daughter was going to school the whole time we were starting this project, so it gave her an opportunity on weekends to come home and work events and stuff. Now, those are 3 NDSU graduates. Now, I know I'm in South Dakota, so don't throw any tomatoes at me. Has anybody heard of a young man that grew up in Britain, South Dakota by the name of Dallas Goddard? Has anybody heard? Raise your hands if you've heard of Dallas Goddard. All right, he's my nephew. So I've been a Jackrabbit fan for the last 4 years myself, so it's been kind of fun. Now that he's graduated, I can get my green and gold back out again. But so look out, we're coming to get the trophy back next year. So I was talking about getting your voice. Boy, I tell you, is it fun to stand out in a field that's not blowing, that's protected, covered. You can stick your pitchfork in the ground and hear the people go, ah, you know, look at that. That's amazing. And it's fun. It's really been fun. And you take them up to the lodge and you feed them something that you raised. There's some rib steaks that the mothers of those calves grazed on native pasture around the lodge on cover crops in the fall, and then went into my cousin's feedlot to produce those beautiful ribeyes. And I get to fry them up at the lodge, grill them up. That's fun. We get to entertain large groups. In fact, when I get home, there's chefs from Minneapolis showing up to do another beer dinner tomorrow evening at the lodge. It'll look just like this tomorrow evening in our lodge. And so we get all these people coming. We get to serve them foods that aren't just from our farm. You know, whenever we can, we certainly do. But we get to serve them foods from the grocery truck. But we get to talk about it. You can take the boogeyman out of the food equation in a hurry if you just have an opportunity. Sometimes at this particular dinner, we paired up, my daughter takes all the reservations. She tries to pair up farmers with non-farming guests that come to these dinners so that they can have those conversations. And it's fun. And we don't, I mean, we're not on any side. We're not against organic. We're not against GMO. We're not, you know, it's just, it's food. It's food and it's proven by science. So let's just all enjoy it, beer included. So there's just a shot of the outside of the lodge. And, you know, it's not something that I would expect very many people to take on an adventure like that on their farm. But I do believe after 5 years, now it's been 5 years we've been open, there's a market in agritourism. Certainly, I mean, Brian is here. He'll probably talk to you later about agritourism on their farm. It's certainly an opportunity, and it's a great way to engage with the public and talk about things like soil health, which are so important. Because if our consumers don't understand what we're doing and what we're trying to do, you know, they don't have a clue. You know, it must be true because on the internet, you've heard that before, right? You know, it's